Our first storyteller is a Cherokee two-spirit shaman. It's Gina Douglas.
Ironically, one of the reasons that I decided to return at 29 years old to college and pursue a graduate degree in library science was because at that time, in 1990, there were more open librarian jobs all across the country than there were qualified people to fill them. The irony, of course, being that today, librarians are all but extinct. But at that time, it seemed like a good idea to pursue a career where I could live and work and have time off in places that other people went on vacation, such as New York City and Colorado Springs. Having lived in New York City for several years, I relocated to rural North Carolina, about half an hour's drive from the coast, and rented a house in a city of 167 people. And I was able to do this because I had a job with the county library system as the head of young adult services and branch services. It was a county of 110,000 people with a central city called Goldsboro, population 35,000. And spotted around the county were smaller towns that insisted on being called cities that had branch libraries in them. And I had been hired to go down there with the idea that I was going to help to introduce the internet to this community. They had trotted out the internet in the main library about a year before, and it hadn't caught on. Now they were bringing high-speed internet to rural branch libraries and communities that nobody had the internet. And the director thought that it would be important to have somebody who had experience and expertise in training the customers and the staff and the teachers and the students about this new internet stuff and how it could change their lives. Ironically, it turned out they didn't want it. There was a big kerfuffle in Mount Olive. I wound up getting fired in about 6 weeks, and the city council there passed an ordinance insisting that the county remove the internet computer from their public library. Now, in a community the size of Seven Springs, everybody knows everybody's business, and my landlord came up to me at the restaurant one day and he said, "I understand you're having difficulty finding a new job, and part of that goes to the fact that you're not qualified to work in the schools in North Carolina, but there's a librarian job at Goldsboro High School that they haven't been able to fill, and I'm on the school board. I can pull some strings and help you get that job if you don't mind working with black people." So, ironically, having been during the Jim Crow era, an all-white segregated school, in 1997, Goldsboro High School had 3 white students in a student body of 1,000. And this was because the federal government had ordered them to desegregate the schools by dissolving all the small local school districts and forming one county-wide school district with 6 high schools and school choice and buses to take the kids to wherever they wanted to go. And it turned out that the black kids in the county would rather go to the city school, and the remaining white kids in the city decided they better hightail it out. Now, you might think that we'd be getting to the end of the ironies, but the greatest irony of this situation was that the principal of Goldsboro High School during the years that I worked there was a very large and impressive black man named Gerald Whitley. And when Gerald had been in 8th grade, he had been gigantic. He wasn't just tall, he was big-boned and heavy and wide, and he had decent basketball skills. Now, Goldsboro High School had a showplace gym with a mezzanine and a team that frequently contended for the state basketball championship. But the all-black school didn't even have a gym, let alone a basketball team. And the coach from Goldsboro High, he heard about this big kid, and he went out to watch him on the playground, and he approached Gerald and he said, "Gerald, how'd you like to play for the Goldsboro High School basketball team? You can't go to our school, but I can let you play on the team. You can play in all the games and practices, you just can't use the showers." And the coach didn't tell Gerald that he was going to be playing against teams of all white players who were going to hate on him and beat on him all game long. And he he's never going to get a ref call. And I never asked Gerald if he felt this was his best option at the time, or if he just loved basketball that much. But he played 4 years for Goldsboro High School, and he earned a scholarship to a traditionally black college, and he played another 4 years while getting a degree in education, and he came back to his hometown to be a math teacher, and now 25 years later, he's the principal of the school that they wouldn't let him go to when he's a kid. Now, I can't say enough in praise of Gerald Whitley or how much I respected him if I took the whole 15 minutes to do it. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. Our school was the only one of the 6 high schools or all the middle schools that didn't have an armed police presence on campus. And this was because Gerald firmly believed and maintained that the only way to have a safe school was to have the parents and the students and the teachers all working together as a team towards that end. And he got us to do that. And we had the safest school in the county, and we didn't need no cops there. Now, the thing that most distinguished Gerald Whitley to me was his commitment to those kids. I worked with other principals before and after, and I guarantee you that Gerald Whitley was the only one who made what's good for the kids as his #1 priority. And Gerald didn't just talk a good game. When he was behind you, he was behind you. I went to him the first week and I said, I think one of the main things we got to do is improve our scores on that state test. And I guarantee you, if we do one thing different, the scores will go up. We got to get these kids to read more. If they read more, they will read more test questions in the time allotted. They will understand those questions better. They will understand the answers better. And their scores will have to go up. Maybe enough for us to get that bonus. And Gerald bought into it, and he gave me a lot of money to buy new books and read posters to put up in the hallways in every classroom. And he got the teachers behind it like it was a school safety issue. And he got the kids behind it like it was a school spirit issue. And we got the bonus every year that I worked there. Now, it was not all pleasantness for me working there. For one thing, there was another librarian, and we didn't see eye to eye. She was an elderly, lifetime church-going grandmother. And when the first new books came in, and they had the Weedsy Bat series about an alternative family, and 12 copies of Chinese Handcuffs about a girl who's being sexually abused by her stepfather, and other books about gay characters and other things, she was not particularly approving. And when the next nonfiction books started coming in, and there was a series, Everything You Need to Know About, and a different one on all different topics, from the mundane like refrigeration and insurance to biological topics. And I guess it was the biological topics that created something of a stir among Miss Boatman's peers on the faculty. So one day Gerald came in and he's flipping through the books on the new book display, and I went over there to see if he had any questions. And he looked in both directions to make sure Miss Boatman wasn't in hearing range, and he picked up the one about menstruation and PMS, and he held it close against his chest, and he said, "Did you really need to buy this one? Don't the girls already know this?" Now, I could have said, this is Hicksville, North Carolina. Half of them probably don't. I could have said, did you see the movie Carrie? It only takes one who don't know. But what I actually said was the best way to start out disagreeing with Gerald Whitley. I said, you're probably right, but Some of these girls have boyfriends, and maybe the boyfriends want to have a better idea what's going on. And I could see the wheels churning in his head, and I was speculating he's thinking about his own wife, who is a teacher there and notoriously temperamental. And perhaps he's thinking, I wish I had read this book 30 years ago. And he nodded his head, and he walked out the library at his steady pace, and he never again questioned a professional decision that I made. Now, for me, the most difficult part of this job was working the after-school study hall. Gerald had such a strict attendance policy that if a kid skipped a class, there's no way they could pass that class unless they made it up in study hall after school. And these kids were not the same kind of kids as the ones that's coming in there voluntarily, who often were a pleasure to work with. Now, we wanted the library to be a welcoming place, and we were lax on enforcement of almost every rule, with the solitary exception of no food and drinks in the library. It was the one thing that we both agreed on, and it was partly to keep out the ants and partly to show that no matter how chaotic it might appear in there, we actually were in charge. It was March of 1999. We were on a year-round school system. It was the last day of the third quarter, the absolute last day anybody could make up a skip day, and the library was packed with kids. And I was back in my office behind the glass panes with one eye on the computer and one eye on the kids, and I seen a girl sneaking chips out of her backpack. Went out and I said, I saw you eating chips. You've got to go. And she got very upset and said, no, I'm supposed to graduate on Saturday, and I can't graduate if I don't make up this study hall. I can't go. And you never tell a kid. You should have thought that in the first place. Their brains are not that developed. So I said, look, and everybody's looking, making it even more of a school safety issue. I said, anytime anybody has got caught in here sneaking food and chips, they have got evicted from the library. Now you got to go. Goodbye. And she got upset and indignant, and she started saying, no, I'm not going. You can't make me leave. I'm not leaving. And trying to keep a lid on things, I said, I can't make you leave, but you can't make me sign your paper. You're not getting credit for this study hall. And I saw her getting madder and madder, and she blew up and she slammed her hands and arms down on the table as she stood up and leaned over the table right in my face, and she was bigger than I was, and she said, I will blow up this school and you in it. Now today there's no question what the consequences of that would be, but this was before Columbine. So I backed off and I went to the office to call Whitley and handed it off to him. And the secretary said, he's gone for the day. And I said, well, which of the assistant principals is in charge? And she said, they've all gone for the day. And I said, well, who's in charge? And she said, well, technically you are. And I said, well, a kid just made a bomb threat in the library. What should we do about it? And she said, did you just hear me tell you you're in charge? And I said, all right, you better call the cops for me. And the police were familiar enough with the campus that they knew that there was a back door from my library off right out into the teacher's parking lot, where my car was the only car out there. And they came pulling up, and I told them what happened, and they took the girl out in handcuffs just about the time that parents are starting to show up to pick up their kids from study hall. And the parents are asking the cops what's going on, and the cops are ignoring them, and they're patting them down, and people are getting out of their cars, and they're asking each other what's going on, and they're all getting more and more agitated. And just about the time that they get the girl in the car and they're pulling up the parking lot, study hall is over, and the kids go flooding out into the parking lot. And when the parents said, what the hell's going on? Do you think the kid said she made a bomb threat? No, they didn't take that seriously. Before Columbine, they said she got caught eating chips. So now there's this big mob of angry people out there, and a contingent of parents came in, and fortunately they listened to me with an open mind, and they begrudgingly admitted I probably did the right thing and that they would go out and disperse the crowd. But they told me something I didn't know before, was that that girl is pregnant. And Mrs. Boatman and her grandmother faculties are the ones pulling every string in sight to try and help her graduate early. And the next morning when I went to school, and the phone rings, and it's the secretary, and she says, Gerald wants to see you. And I went down there marching at a funereal pace, and I went straight up to his desk, and I said, first of all, let me say I'm sorry. And he shook it off, shaking his head, waving his hands, said, no, you don't have nothing to be sorry about. It's your job to do your best under difficult circumstances, and sometimes it don't work out well. And that's when it's my job to fix it. And I never heard another word about it. It is about 3 weeks later that it was Gerald taking a funereal pace into my office where the school library media center was, and he pushed the button to turn on the TV, and I knew there was another button he could put it on in every classroom, and it was Columbine. And we watched it for about a minute, and he looked at me, and I shrugged my shoulders and nodded, and he put it on in every classroom, and the world changed. It just didn't change enough because it's still happening.